Hi, my name is Lila Seymour, and today I will be discussing and analyzing the painting of The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli. Sandro Botticelli, born in 1445 in Florence, Italy, was one of the greatest painters of the Florentine Renaissance. The Birth of Venus, often said to epitomize for modern viewers the spirit of the Renaissance, Botticelli learned the techniques of panel painting and fresco, and gave him an assured control of linear perspective. He was commissioned by wealthy families of Florence like the Medici family. Botticelli painted religious and mythological subject matter. This impressive mythological composition is centered on the naked goddess Venus emerging from the shell drifting to Cyprus shore, embodying the rebirth of civilization, a new hope, and social and cultural political shift which occurred after the Middle Age turmoil. The painting resides in the Uffizi Gallery, a prominent art museum in Florence, Italy. The Birth of Venus is one of the most famous mythological paintings from the early Renaissance period. Although Botticelli was not as popular as other artists from the Renaissance such as Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, he still contributed one of the most beautiful and sensory-enriching paintings of the goddess Venus. The Birth of Venus painting was created during the 1400s, which was a period in European history that saw a lot of cultural and economic changes. A transitional period from the Middle Ages and art styles progressed by Byzantine to Romanesque and then Gothic, leading to the beginning of the Renaissance. The Birth of Venus painted on canvas being one of the first of this type of medium used for painting. Most paintings were done on wooden panels, but canvases became more popular because they were cheaper. Botticelli uses linear perspective painted on two canvases sewn together. Botticelli takes his inspiration from classical statues for Venus's modest pose. This philosophical meaning behind this work is of love and spiritual beauty as a driving force of life. To the Greeks, she is Aphrodite, and to the Romans, she is Venus. Fun fact, April is often considered the month of Venus. The Birth of Venus presents Venus rising from the sea on a large scallop shell, arriving on the island of Cyprus. Born of the sea spray and blown there by the winds. To the left, she is met by the Greek god Zephyr of the winds, and on the right, a young woman, often identified as the Hora of Spring, who holds out a cloak covered in flowers, symbolizing spring. The focal point of Botticelli's The Birth of Venus is the central figure of the goddess of love and beauty. Botticelli used tempera, which is a type of paint made from egg or fig milk. The painting is bright while utilizing dark colors with the forest to contrast Venus, to create a stronger focal point with the contrast between light and dark. The texture of the painting is smooth. This is the finish of tempera paint. Botticelli was influenced by humanism. Venus is in the center of the painting, standing in a contrapposto pose. The use of darker outlines also creates a lack of depth to the painting, creating more two-dimensionality. We see the darker horizon line in the background and the figures have no shadows, all of which add to a general flatness of the composition. Depth is also evident in the landscape. We see this in the green hills and the smaller scattered trees in the far background of the composition. This suggests the idea of distance seen from the foreground shore where most of our attention is drawn to. When looking at Venus, the body language in the contrapposto pose reminded me a lot of the very famous sculpture Venus de Milo. Created in 150 BCE, the use of humanism between both paintings are very similar to one another, yet created at different times. Representation and normalization of the female body, although still painted through the male gaze in The Birth of Venus, it actually portrays a fairly realistic and anatomically correct and proportional female body, which is rarely idolized and is slowly being portrayed more and more in today's society, yet was rarely ever portrayed back then. For its time, it was more controversial by going against Christian values by displaying Venus in the nude, during the Renaissance where it was scandalous for women to show hardly any skin at all. A natural body on such an iconic goddess representing the epitome of beauty, I find it very refreshing to see normal proportions and a humanistic style with Venus having an actually proportional and relatively realistic body type. I think it's an important representation of women's bodies, and students should be studying this work to understand the message behind the art and the Renaissance period and appreciate the technique Botticelli was able to use in the story The Birth of Venus tells. Thank you so much for listening.